Welcome back to the Score Sunday. Of course, it's very busy on the high school gridiron for the playoffs, but also big news out here at Bob Reed Field in Geneseo this week as the Maple Leafs are looking for a new head coach for the first time in 2 decades, joined now by the former head coach, I guess you could say, of the Geneseo football team, Larry Johnsen. 20 years at this place. You've played here. You've been, I think Maple Leafs have been part of you your entire life. Stepping down after this year, take me through the decision. When did you know and the thought process of calling it a day?
You know, it really started hitting me these last 2 years. Those people that really know me and understand me know that my family is like the top priority for me. And my daughter chose to go on to Cornell College out in Mount Vernon to continue playing volleyball. And then I saw my wife going out and, going to the games by herself during the week, and I caught myself when I was at her games on the weekend, I'd be there physically, but mentally I wasn't there. And so, you start taking a long look at yourself and as I've mentioned and tried to impress upon people that, you have a few priorities in your life, and those change throughout your career and stuff like that. And as you get older and times are changing with families and stuff like that. But it really just hit me, and it was like, this isn't right. And my family has supported me for, 20 years, 20 plus years, Sarah longer than that. With Luke being done this year, going to do the same thing right now, that's his decision. I just felt I wasn't going to be doing anybody any good. And I love this program, I love this town, I love this community, I love the people of this community, and I just felt that that would be wrong.
I know this year was extra special. Just being out here for the preview and the few times I was around, the energy with this senior class and obviously Luke, to go out with these seniors who I think you coached some of them in baseball, which you should apologize to Joe about for coaching them in baseball. Was that extra special? Was it, you write a storybook ending, to go out with this group kind of feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I've had a lot of special teams, and every team's got its own story. And this one with Luke and all the guys that he grew up with, it was special. And I tried the very best that I could to just throw myself into it and do the best that I could. And, I just was very thankful, for Joe and to giving me that opportunity. He was there all the time for me. And, for the assistants that I've had over the years that have thrown themselves into things, into this coaching thing, I'm very appreciative of that. And I had a good time this year, and, I was really sad to see it end.
Have you taken some time this week to sit back a little bit? And when will you start reflecting on the amount of memories that this place and this program has provided for you?
I have. I'd be lying if I hadn't, if I didn't tell you that. And I think a lot of it comes from former players that have sent me messages and reached out to me and stuff like that. And it means a lot. It really means a lot of thank yous and best of lucks and memories and stuff like that. And every once in a while, for some of them, I've got to go back and apologize again for some of the things I did to them. And I have. And like I said, every team's got its own story and every team's got its own memories. And I'm thankful for all of them.
I might ask you the impossible here, but 145 wins. Do a few stand out? Is there a few wins that stand out that you're like, I'm going to remember walking off this field here or this field there with a crazy win or a crazy finish?
There are a couple that, just pop out, like the crazy endings and stuff like that, both good and bad. But, you go back when we beat Morris here on the final play of the game or one of the final plays of the game. There was some Bishop Mack playoff games that we had that were really tied up there. The Richmond-Burton game in 2009 that got us to the state championship game, and after getting beat by them the year before. Those are just some that just pop out right away because of crazy circumstances. But, I also remember my 2004 first win here against East Moline. This is the only job I ever wanted, and I never really looked at it as a job, or I tried not to. But I'm just, it's just the way it is. And so like I said, I'm extremely thankful for everything.
I could talk to you all day. I'm going to ask you a few more, though.
It's fine.
When you look at a guy that's just above you, and you mentioned him already, Bob Reed, I think he's 146, you're 145, and you look at that lineage of what the tradition here is, what did you learn from those guys? What did you learn from Dad? And I know that that's an open question that we could probably do another half-hour show on. But is there one or two things that you say when it comes to Bob Reed, this is the thing that stands out the most, or your dad, this is the thing that stands out the most?
I think with both of them, and this is how I honestly feel, I don't think they really cared about the number of wins. You know, and I didn't know how many wins that I had, and I didn't care how many wins that I had. You know, it was brought up in this, and I still, you know, you just brought it up, and I hadn't even remembered it then, you know. And so Joe made that comment, you know, about that, and I was like, you know, there's just some records that aren't meant to be broken.
Yeah.
And Coach Reed was the guy that really got this back on track, and he deserves to have the most wins, because, I mean, that's just the way it is. But, you know, I think both guys, you know, while they were proud of what they did, I think they were pretty humble people.
Well, one thing that hasn't changed out here in Geneseo is you. You've been a class act. You've been great to us. We appreciate you. We're going to miss you, but you're not going anywhere.
Right.
So we'll still see you. We appreciate everything you've done.
Well, thank you very much.
We're going to go from one Geneseo legend to another Geneseo legend, Dan Pearson, and your FCA Story of the Week right after this.